Hey everyone, and welcome to the Shared Cup podcast. This is episode 3, and today my guest, Kristi Smith, is going to share her personal story of loss and grief and what God gave her to get through it, and now how she's using it to help thousands of other people around the world. I'm Alison Liddic, and this podcast is for women who want to experience the overflowing love of God through our own stories. We pray that you are blessed by this message. Hi, and welcome to the Shared Cup podcast. I am your host, Alison Liddic, and my guest today is Kristi Smith. Kristi, welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for coming on. I'm so excited for you to share your story and everything that you have to offer. I cannot wait to dive into this. I know everyone's going to love it. Why don't we start, though, just by getting to know Kristi a little bit? So tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Kristi Smith, and I'm an author and a speaker, and I'm also a care director at our Christ Church. So I deal with people all the time that are going through crisis and helping them navigate those emotions and learn how to feel and heal, and that's my life. I love it.
All right, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
2 daughters, Abby and Faith. Abby lives in Germany with her husband Jared, and they're missionaries over there.
Wow.
And then Faith and Howard live here in the States. They live in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is beautiful, by the way. And so I miss my girls, but we're connected because of technology, thank God. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is a beautiful area of the country. Do you get to visit often?
It's an 8-hour drive, so I will load up all my sermons and just listen to things on the way down, so my soul gets filled up while I'm driving all those miles. I get there and I'm all pumped up, and it's good. So
oh, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
That's great. So you're an author and a speaker. So if someone wanted to invite you to come speak or get your book, we'll definitely post that in the comments. But tell us just real quick before we get started how they would get in contact with you to speak, and then where they can find your book.
Absolutely. They would go to dreamsmithbooks.com. dreamsmithbooks.com.
Perfect.
My website.
All right, great. That's it. So like I said, I'm excited to dive into your story. So I'll let you take it away, Kristi, and just tell us, where the story began.
I think the word for today is being able to navigate these hard emotions that we're going through with the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of an expert on those supercharged emotions. My book is about grief, and it's called Dream, A Guide to Grieving Gracefully, with 5 keys to unlock the grip of grief. So in the pandemic, we're going through very similar emotions that you go through with grief: anger, sadness, confusion, all of those things. So I think this book will really speak today, not just to grievers, but to all of us, because we're all going through such strange times, and all of our emotions are up. So I think it's a great word for today.
I agree with you. And I do think you're right. This time, especially, people are grieving plans that didn't happen, graduations that aren't going to happen, stuff like that. Yes. And then obviously the obvious, sickness and death that's happening right now. So it is perfect timing. Mm-hmm. So tell me about that. I know there's a story behind where that came from. So tell me how the story began.
Well, it's not a good tale, but it ends up that the Lord uses all things for good. Yeah. But my husband died 8 years ago, and he died suddenly. He was very healthy. He was a pilot and a pastor. Mm-hmm. And so his heart was healthy. They test your heart. The FAA will test your heart every 6 months to make sure it's good. But for some reason, that night, Mike had cardiac arrest, which meant that his heart just stopped. He didn't have a heart attack or anything. He was riding home with his buddy. And he said to him, I'm feeling tired all of a sudden. And Dave said, well, just put your head back. And that was at the beginning of our cul-de-sac. By the time they got down to our driveway, he was gone. He was really gone. So we got that horrible knock on the door and went out. The girls and I, Abby was 17 and Faith was 15, and saw him, knew he was gone. There was just a knowing that he was so full of life. To see him lifeless, it was very obvious. So we did all the things that you do, doing CPR and calling the paramedics. And they worked on him in the driveway for like 20 minutes, doing the shock, trying to bring his heart back. And I just kept thinking that was going to do it,
Right.
But then the paramedics said, we're going to need to take him in and keep working on him. And that's when the girls and I and our neighbors went up to the edge of our driveway up towards the garage and just started praying. I mean, like praying like you would if somebody was laying there dying. We were just praying it all in. And at that time, it was, I think people have talked about it before, where you go through this surreal time and everything goes in slow motion.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I just felt this blanket of peace coming down over us. And I was just amazed that the peace that came in, it was not from the situation. It was truly from God. And that allowed us to go to the hospital and to witness, the doctors coming out and saying, I'm sorry, we did everything we could, just couldn't bring him back. And those screams from my daughters, I will never forget, just absolute horror that they would, not be able to go home with their dad. So 2 hours later, we're home. And it's just bizarre, literally just took our breath away. So for that next year, we really were in survival mode. And I did journal work where I just wrote down all the things I was feeling and just trying to process my own emotions.
Yeah.
And one of the things I kept doing was looking around at other people, especially other believers, and asking them, how did you go through this? I mean, when you lost your mom or you lost your husband or you lost a child, how did you get through those emotions? And I got two answers I did not like. And the first one was, time heals all wounds. And I thought, well, yes, but we don't tell anybody else that. Going through any other thing in their life, we don't just say time heals all wounds. If you have a broken arm, we say, go to the doctor. They can do this, and then you'll do this, and then you'll have rehab when they take the cast off. There's a process to it. So I was really kind of in search of that process.
Yeah.
And the other thing that people said to me that I totally refused was, you'll never get over it. You'll always have this huge hole in your heart. You're just never, it's always just going to be there. And I thought, that's not really the promise that the Lord said, because he said he would go with us through the valley, right? He wouldn't leave us there. So I was looking for how to get through that valley. And at the end of the year, I had enough writings that I spread them out on my dining room table and all over my living room floor. And I said, Lord, if you can help me put this together in a way that somebody could hear what I'm trying to say, if there's a way that I could leave those breadcrumbs for them, when you're in this stage, this is what you do. This stage, do this. It'll help you process your pain and really start moving it towards healing. Because a lot of us in grieving, we know how to hurt. We don't know how to heal. We just don't. As a society, we're not taught how to grieve. Right. And so this was kind of a very practical handbook that the Lord came together with on. It's called DREAM, and that's an acronym. I thought DREAM should be good because really when the nightmare happens, you have to dare to dream. That's how you get through it. And so he collected it all together and made sense. And those are the 5 acronyms. Those are the 5 keys, because there's 5 stages of grief.
Okay, so pause real fast. So you were journaling and God turned it into a book?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
So just from your journaling over the year, you were just writing. Were you writing it with the intention of doing a book?
Absolutely not. No, I was just processing my pain. But because I knew there was such a need for it, I was like, God, if you could help put this together some way that people could actually get something out of it, they could hear. Because people gave me books when Mike died.
Yeah.
And it was almost, I didn't appreciate it so much because a lot of the books were about another person's very sad story about when their son ran over their daughter in the driveway. And I was just like, I can't handle any more grief. I'm drowning in grief.
Right.
But I wanted there to be a handbook out there that it would help people very practically. If you're going through this, try this. It seems to help a lot of people. Give this a try. And that's what we did. We came up with the 5 keys to unlock the grip of grief. Because a lot of people that I met were caught up in grief. A lot of women get stuck in anger.
Yeah.
It's where they land because it feels powerful to be angry. And a lot of men, because they don't approach their emotions as often, we'll get stuck in the sadness. And so that's no way to live. And I knew that people didn't want to be there. They just didn't know how not to be there.
Right.
So,
well, that's incredible. I mean, that really is a supernatural work of God.
It was.
He used your journaling and your healing, the process that you were going through, to put that together. So that I see as a true gift from God, your book.
It was, and it was a family project because at the time I was not a computer person. So I was writing it all by hand. So my daughter Faith, the younger one, put it all into the computer, all 48,000 words. And then my daughter Abby was a photographer, and she did the cover of the book, which is beautiful. It's taken at Hocking Hills, and it's a picture of trees in the forest, but one tree specifically is growing out of a rock, literally growing out of a rock. And I thought, that's kind of symbolic of what the promise we have is, that we go through hard times and we will grow from them. The Lord will help us grow.
Wow, that's beautiful that everyone was able to be a part of it. That's great. Mm-hmm. Do you mind taking us through parts? Obviously I know we don't have time to read the whole book together, but do you mind just kind of giving everyone that's listening or watching this podcast an idea of those steps and what that looks like?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, denial is the first stage that happens in grief. And actually, I believe all of these stages, all of these emotions are gifts. So we're not trying to skip by the anger or the sadness. We're trying to learn how to process it. Mm-hmm. So let's start with denial, since that's the first phase. It's shock. And I'm so grateful that the Lord gives us that physical tranquilizer that helps us kind of wake up slowly, so that the full brunt of something doesn't come in on us and just we would implode.
Crush us,
and
right?
So, but when you feel like you're getting caught up in denial, when people are really avoiding their grief, and most people do, because they're afraid, if I start feeling these feelings, I'm going to get lost. It's going to be like this deep, dark cave, and I'm not going to come out. And so they avoid it. Well, because we have this process, you don't have to have that fear. You can wake up to your emotions. I call it dare to dream. When the nightmare happens, dare to dream. So the first key to unlock denial is the letter D from dream, and that's dare to dream. And that chapter is a lot about hope, how to infuse hope. You don't know how you're going to get through it, but claiming that you will get through it. And that helps so much for people to claim that hope. It's very powerful. But I know the situation for me that woke me up, I was at a wedding. It was about a year after Mike had died. And I was going because my daughter was in the wedding. It was on his birthday, which made it loaded with all kinds of emotions. Made it through the wedding, sitting at the reception, eating my cake, drinking my coffee, just being so proud, because as a widow, it's so hard to go to a wedding. So proud of myself. And all of a sudden I heard, all the single ladies, we need all the single ladies to come out on the dance floor. In 5 minutes, the bride will be throwing the bouquet. And I just kind of passed through it. And then I took another bite of my cake and I was like, wow, he's talking to me. This is the first time I'm at a wedding and I'm a single lady.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow, I can just sit here. Nobody would drag me out on the dance floor and say, Kristi, you're a single lady. You better get out here. But I knew my girls were watching me. And that motivation, because they're going to model everything we do, they're going to do. And I decided I'm just going to get up and go do it. So I walked out onto the dance floor, and it was filled with all these 20-somethings with blonde hair up in tight buns, and they were just beautiful. And then there's this middle-aged lady out in the middle of them. I just felt completely awkward. But, of course, the bride threw the bouquet to me. And, that's how it goes. The Lord's like, I'm going to help you. We're going to get through this. So I did this huge victory lap around the girls, just like, woohoo, woohoo, mama got it, and it was, then we all started dancing. And I think it was the first time I really felt like that verse that says he'll turn our mourning into dancing. I mean, it was tangible. Yeah. So I really encourage people, when you're in denial, to start to dare to dream, to put hope around it. And that is so powerful.
That's beautiful. I love
Yeah,
that.
thank you. And then the next emotion that most people go to, it's not in any order, but it fits my acronym. So this is the way that I do it, is the anger phase. And the anger phase is so absolutely ugly. It's not like any anger I had witnessed before. I found new cuss words I didn't even know I could say. And it was just lovely, all these things flying out of my mouth. But I was just so angry about the situation that the girls wouldn't have their dad. And what happened when they were going to go get married, who's going to walk them down the aisle, all of these things I was so mad about. And what I encourage people to do when they're in the anger phase is to really do some investigation on what is making you mad. Because in general, it's not the dishwasher, unloading the dishwasher. It's not the people in traffic. It's really something else that is hurting you deeply. And so I asked them to keep asking why. Why are you mad about the situation? Why? And you're able to actually narrow down by what I call removing the stinger. So the R in dream is remove the stinger. And that has to do with, like a bee sting. If the bee stinger is still in there, healing does not happen. In fact, it gets worse. It gets red and swollen. It can lead to infection. So really determining what is the stinger for me and then diffusing it by removing it. The way that we did it was when Abby was going to get married, we announced, her engagement, and everyone, instead of being so excited for her, was just aghast with, oh my gosh, who's going to walk her down the aisle? Who's going to walk her down the aisle? And it was a real dilemma. We knew that was a big deal because the girls, both of them, were very close to Mike. I mean, he adored his girls. So it was a real problem. And we just determined we're going to remove that stinger by really planning for that moment and not being caught off guard by it. So she found this beautiful song to walk herself down the aisle. She determined, no, it can't be grandpa. It can't be one of my uncles or one of my friends, and not even me as mom. She wanted to claim all of the love that Mike had put down in her heart and just walk in that grace and that elegance. And it was the moment of the day that everyone was just on pins and needles the whole time. You could just feel it in the air. And when those doors opened and she just came out radiant and walked down beaming, there was just this tangible, we all knew it was a glorious moment. And so that's the power of removing the stinger. When you face that anger and you deal with it, it can transcend and you can have powerful things happen because of that. So it's so important to deal with our emotions. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's big. I would love to see that moment of her, the doors opening. Oh,
I have a video. It's transcendent. It really is. And then another emotion that people get stuck in, and you've probably witnessed this yourself, Alison, is sadness. Some people just get absolutely locked up in the sadness and cannot shake it. It's like it has a hold on them. And so one of the things that in the book I talk about is the E of dream is embrace awkward. I mean, there's really probably something you have to do when you're sad to help you pop yourself out of it. And it's hard because at the sad phase, you feel very vulnerable. So you don't feel like putting yourself out there. You usually tend to isolate. And I really encourage people to do the exact opposite. And that's really embrace the awkwardness of it. Just go with it. Changes happened, just embrace it. And I have a very funny story in the book called The Potty Parable. It's not in the Bible, but it's in my book. It's called The Potty Parable.
Oh, I love it.
It's around the same time frame as the wedding. It's about a year after Mike had died. And we were kind of in that bubble of everyone knowing what was going on in our lives because Mike was a big figure in our town and our church. And so everywhere that I went, grocery store, anywhere, people would be like, how are you doing? How are the girls? And it was always this heaviness. Yeah. And I craved anonymity. What's that word? When nobody knows who you are, you could just go and be a normal fly on the wall. And so my girlfriend invited me to this birthday party and I wasn't going to know anybody. And I thought, this is my ticket. So I got all dressed up and looked just fine, looking good, girl. And I went to this party and there was like 100 adults there. There was this huge event. caterers and DJs and media people. It was an event. So I'm living large, loving this, eating off the buffet and just drinking and having a good time with my girlfriend. She goes into the bathroom downstairs, and then she comes out and I go in, and I realize that the door doesn't lock. It's new construction, brand new house, gorgeous modern house in Centerville. And I thought, well, that's strange, but my girlfriend just was in here, so she knows the door doesn't lock. She'll watch out for me. So I sit down on the potty. I'm in a dress, sit down on the potty, have my little toilet paper in my hand, just so proud of myself. Girl, look at you. You're doing so good. And in walks the best looking man at the party. I mean, just gorgeous, like a Greek goddess, only he was Italian. So he had like slick back, beautiful black hair, and he had on a pressed shirt. I mean, he had actually ironed his shirt. He had cufflinks. I was like, who wears cufflinks anymore? Italian shoes. He was beautiful. And I got all of that vision in about, 20 seconds, and he got all of me. Like, Lord, on the potty. This is not how you want to be seen. It's not a good thing. I can tell you that. I've witnessed it. It is not good. And I was just like terrified, like deer caught in the headlights of close the door, back out.
Right.
He finally did. I think he was as shocked as I was. So he finally did. And I sat there for a minute. I thought, well, okay, it's all right, because nobody knows I'm here. So I can sneak out the back and nobody's going to be like, where did Kristi go? Is she okay?
Yeah.
I could just, leave. I could escape. That's a good plan. I was all about it until I stood up and washed my hands. I'm looking myself in the mirror and I said, girl, why did you come here? And I was like, because I wanted to have a good time. I need a break. I need to be out and just mingle with people. And God's like, well, why don't you just do that? And I was like, well, because Mr. Sexy's out there and I'm going to be so embarrassed standing around. Like, is he across the room? Are we going to make eye contact? What's going to happen? And I determined to embrace the awkward, because you can hide or seek. As kids, we play hide and seek, and that's a fun game. But when you're caught up in these emotions, when you want to hide, I tell people seek, like lean into that awkward. So this is what I did, Allison. I went out, spied him across the room, and I walked right up to him and said, hi. I shook his hand. I'm Kristi Smith. I think we should meet. And it diffused it all. I mean, he laughed. I laughed. The people around us were like, oh my gosh, you're that girl he was just telling us. You walked in on somebody. I'm like, yeah.
You're the potty girl.
I'm that girl. That is me. I'm the potty girl. But people remember that story. And when they're caught up in their awkward moment, instead of retreating, which we can't always be brave. I tell people to be brave every day, all day is exhausting. But if you can be brave 5 minutes a day, it will change your life. And that was one of my moments where I could be brave. I didn't have all those moments, but that's the one I put in the book, because I was brave. And I think it's powerful when you can turn the tide on these emotions and it starts you moving in the right direction. So anytime I feel sad, I know there's probably a phone call I need to make or something that I need to do to help pop me out of that sadness. It's very powerful.
That's good. I love that story. I mean, I'm sure you didn't love it in the moment, but
no, it's the worst. But always the worst is the one that you laugh about the most later. Not at the time, but you later. Yeah. And then the next stage. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love what you said. When you want to hide, you need to seek. I love that so much. I mean, for anything, like even work related, right? Just things that are awkward or uncomfortable. It's like, no, you need to go do it, girl. I love that so much.
Well, I wrote this book originally mostly for widows. I thought, well, widows will need to hear this. But then when it first came out, I got all this feedback from people that had gone through divorces. And they were like, wow, I needed to, that's a form of grieving.
Yeah.
The death of the family you thought you would have. And so getting feedback from people that had gone through divorces, not just experiencing death.
Right.
And then there were people that approached me like, wow, I have really gone through this season of absolute dysfunction with my family. And so holidays are wretched.
Mm.
And I'm grieving not being able to have that safe home place that I'm used to having. So they're grieving. And I call that, being able to deal with dysfunction, not just death and divorce, dysfunction too. And then
Right.
disease, that has so much grief along with it. Women will lose their hair and they'll have body parts cut off, all in the name of trying to live. That's a grieving.
Yeah.
Alzheimer's, that person has not died, but boy, you're grieving that they're not remembering all the things, and it's treacherous. So there's all different forms of grief when you're losing something.
Wow.
But then I was surprised by another form of grief, and that was disappointment. And that was people, they hadn't lost something. Those were people that actually were longing for something. So people that are struggling with infertility, they haven't lost a child necessarily, but that longing and that grieving is so real.
Wow,
and so it transcends the different kinds. It's not just about death. People that lose their job have huge identity in their job because that's where they spend all their time. That's what they were good at. That's where they had all their coworkers they spent 8 hours a day with. It's a loss. And so really this book is meant to transcend any form of grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can totally see that. And especially with what we're going through right now, like you said before, with the pandemic, there's a lot of loss and disappointment and grief going on. So very, very relevant always, but especially right now.
Yeah, we just went through Easter and nobody had their traditional Easter that they're used to. And it's a form of grieving. Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely.
Next to last one, it's the fourth stage right before acceptance, called bargaining.
Okay.
And I don't really know that I understood what bargaining was before I went through it. And it was really only in hindsight when I was looking back that I realized, oh, that's what bargaining is. Bargaining is really when you get to the point in your grief, when you've gone through the denial, the anger, the sadness, you've just been in this for a long time, and you get a chip on your shoulder. It's like the world owes me and God owes me, It's this feeling of people better cater to me because I've been through so much. Now, I'm not saying it's pretty. I'm just saying it's a reality. We go through it. The Lord better bring me a husband that has hair this time. Mike was bald. So I just went through all this list of things that was nasty, but real about, I better be paid off financially because of all this grief I've gone through emotionally. And so when people are going through the bargaining phase, the key to unlock that is when you can be honest with yourself. And instead of demanding what you want, you ask for what you need. And that is the dream, is ask for help. And so that phase, instead of just being so ugly about it, if you can soften and just say, really, I need help, and ask the people that already offered, because when you're going through things, people say, if you need anything, let me know. And they mean it. They authentically mean it.
Yeah.
So I recommend people to make 2 lists. One is a list of things that you would need help with. Everybody needs different help. If you're used to doing the finances and that's no big issue to you, you don't need help there. But if you've never done the finances, you need help there. Or if he always mowed the lawn and now the lawn is getting tall, whatever it is that you need help with, that list. And then on the other side of the paper, make a list of all the people that said they were willing to help. And then as you are able to pair those up, the neighbor across the street mowed the lawn happily, like glad to do it for me and the girls, glad to do it to honor Mike. He felt like a hero. And it's really important in this stage, especially, that we are able to be vulnerable enough to ask for the help, because when the people show up and they're able to help, they feel like heroes. I mean, they really just love being able to help you. And we need the help. Quite honestly, we need the help.
Yeah.
There was a study done. I didn't do the study, so people don't write me in about this. Don't get mad at me. I didn't do it. But there was a study done where they put monkeys in cages, and then they put them through different alarming things, loud sounds, flashing lights, that kind of thing. And they registered their stress level. And then they did another study, another fresh group of monkeys. This time, instead of the monkey being alone in the cage, they either had another monkey with them or they had a stuffed animal, and did the same loud sounds and flashing lights and everything, and registered their stress level. And the difference was remarkable. And this is why I really encourage people to ask for help, because the stress level of the second group, who either had a monkey with them or a stuffed animal, was half, 50% less stress, just because they weren't going through it alone. So even though it's awkward, I ask people really ask for that help that you need, because it will lower your stress level. And if I can do anything to lower my stress level in half, who doesn't sign up for that?
Gonna do it right away.
really do it right now. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
and
great.
And then the final, thank you.
Yeah.
The final phase, which is what we're after from the very beginning, is acceptance. And acceptance is really a strange phenomenon, because it's not like you really are happy about what happened ever, but you're able to integrate it into your life in a way that you're not defined by it. It's part of your life, but it doesn't define your whole life, your whole existence. And so the key to lock in, all these other keys were keys to unlock. You're unlocking anger, sadness, bargaining. This is a key you want to use to lock in. You want to lock in that acceptance. And the way that you do that is the M of dream, which is move on. What I mean by that is a very gentle moving on. It's not, I'm over it. I don't want to talk about it. It's not a dishonoring whatever you went through. It's not a dishonoring someone if someone's died. It's truly you just being able to do that next thing that you need to do to live. So, for instance, when Mike died that night, 2 hours later, we're back home. What do I do? I'm just in shock. I knew I couldn't go back into the bedroom. I couldn't go in, sleep in that king size bed where we had just been the night before.
Yeah.
So I slept on the couch. And every night for almost 3 months, I slept on the couch. I wrapped up in a blanket, like my little cocoon. And that was the way that I was existing. But at some point, I realized I needed to be able to move on just from that part. And so for Christmas that year, I got rid of the king bed. I bought a queen bed because I'm still the queen. I painted the bedroom. A gentleman came in and helped me hang some curtains. I got new bedding. I totally changed it to this spa retreat for me, very feminine. And then I was able to move from the couch to the bedroom. Now, in reality, it was about 20 feet. But unless I would have been able to really move on, it might as well have been a million miles.
Right. Yeah.
And so really what I'm asking people to do is just that next thing that brings them back to a normal life. Whatever that is for you, I don't know what it is, but for me, I knew that was something really important that I needed to do.
That's good.
And then, I recommend that people are aware of, you're going to go through these emotions again. It's not a one-time dare to dream. I checked all the box and now I'm done. You have to dare to dream again and again and again. But this time you know how to do it. You know to embrace the awkward. You know to remove the stinger. You have a working tool that you've already worked through and it works for you. So you dare to dream again. And it's helped people tremendously. I will tell you, I recommend if you know anybody who needs this book, buy it for them and then tell them to put it on the back of their toilet. Yes, it's okay. Put it on the back of your toilet and just read a little bit each day, because it's when you're grieving, you just don't have very many brain cells to rub together. Really, comprehension is gone. And so I wrote it with that in mind, because I was a griever. And I knew you could only read about a page or a page and a half, and then you were at max capacity. So put it on the back of your toilet, and over time, you read a little bit each day, then it's like an IV drip, and it really gets that healing medicine down in there. And, in a month or two, you realize, wow, I am feeling better. I'm moving towards healing. I'm not just hurting, I'm
Yeah.
starting to heal.
I love that, because so many people get stuck in one of they get stuck in the early stages, right? So what
Yeah.
would you say? Obviously, yeah, we want people to dive in and learn this because, God did major work through you with putting this together. What would you say to someone right now that's stuck and can't seem to move?
Well, there's two categories of people. There are people that are stuck and they don't realize it. Usually the family members are able to tell. So I recommend the family members give them the book. If they don't order it themselves, you give it to them and just say, I saw this crazy redhead lady on a podcast and she went through something similar like you did. I thought maybe she could say something that would help you, mom or dad or sister or friend or whatever. And that way it's just a gentle nudging.
Yeah.
It's not like, you need this, you are so messed up. It's just
right.
more like, I think this would help you. And so sometimes it's not the people themselves that recognize it, but eventually, knowing that there actually is a tool out there that will help. It's these breadcrumbs. When you're going through this, you do this, then the next breadcrumb, it leads you through it. Just knowing that tool's out there is so powerful because people want to heal. Nobody wants to be stuck in sadness or anger. They just don't. They just don't know how not to. And so this is for them.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that and going into the different stages and just for putting this together and giving people hope. So, because there are so many books out there that are like the one that you talked about, where it's someone else's deep, saddening story that's just going to deepen your sadness if you read it. So I love that first of all, that you journaled for therapy and that God showed you. And I really would have loved to have been a fly on the wall while you're piecing it all together and like, whoa, God, what are you doing right now? But I love
it was
that
powerful.
so much.
It was because none of us can heal on our own.
Yeah.
We obviously, I don't know how people grieve without understanding of the Lord. But even beyond that, we need some practical how-tos. So yeah, it's one book that you could give to someone even if they're not a believer. It really has a spiritual base to it, but it's practical enough that they'll get something out of it, and maybe it will waken them up a little bit in their spirit too.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So say your website again for everyone.
dreamsmithbooks.com.
Okay, perfect. And then they can get the book on Amazon as well. And if they want to book you to come speak at an event or anything like that, they just go to your website, correct?
Yes. Yep. They can email me through the website.
Well, I'm so glad that you went into your story. And like you said, if anyone that's watching or listening to this podcast, if you are going through grief or disappointment or anything that we've just talked about, get the book. If you know of someone that is going through that, get them the book, leave it on their toilet.
Yes.
Tell them there's hope. It's not more grief. It's a book of hope and a guide. And I love that you said it's the breadcrumbs and just enough for them to comprehend. I mean, even me, I need things broken down like that personally.
Right.
Give me a little bit at a time and let me use it and move on.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I know this has been a while now, but how are you doing now?
I'm doing wonderful. That's, I think, the reason that we have credibility to share this, because it works, and not just for me and the girls, but I've seen it work for thousands of people. I almost have a money back guarantee that if you don't get something out of it, let me know. But everyone that's read it is like, wow, something sparked in them and spoke to them in a way that really helped them move towards healing. So that's the goal.
That's fantastic. I love it. Well, thank you again, Kristi. You are a joy. And I would like to have you back again sometime in the future to dive into something a little bit deeper. But I appreciate everything that you shared, that you're being obedient with what God is having you do, which is huge. And I know there's blessing there for sure. So I'm just grateful for you and for this story. And turning the tragedy that you went into or went
Mm.
through into hope for other people. So thank you for doing that.
Mhm. Well, thank you for the shared cup, because grief is something that we all share.
Yep.
In that shared cup, we're drinking in what the Lord is giving us and sharing that with each other. That's beautiful.
Amen. Thank you. That's
Mhm.
exactly the point behind it. I love that. Well, Kristi, thank you again for coming on the show. And for all of you listening, we will have another podcast released next Thursday at 9 a.m. So stay tuned for that. But Kristi, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Allison.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today for the Shared Cup podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember that each one of us has a story that shows the overflowing love of God. If you want to be a guest on our podcast, put a comment below and we'll send you the link to apply. Have a blessed day, and thank you so much for joining us.